Welcome back to Revise and Resubmit, and welcome to another weekend book review. I'm Pavlov.
And I'm Nikita.
Today we're kicking off something a bit different.
We're going to explore a really quite remarkable book, How Prime Ministers Decide by Neerja Chowdhury.
She's a very acclaimed journalist and political commentator.
Exactly. And just so we're clear from the start, this conversation is, well, it's an assisted summary. We've used a large language model to help us kind of unpack the rich content in her work.
The Neerja Chowdhury herself, her credentials are just incredible. Over 40 years covering Indian politics.
40 years. She was political editor of the Indian Express for a decade, covered 8 prime ministers, 10 Lok Sabha elections. That's India's lower house of parliament.
And the awards she's won. The Chameli Devi Jain Award back in '81, the PUCL Journalism for Human Rights Award, the Prem Bhatia Award. She's hugely respected.
Absolutely. She's still a contributing editor for the Indian Express, and her column is, well, it's widely followed. She's based in Gurgaon.
So while we hope you find this discussion useful,
we really, really urge you, whether you listen to us regularly or not, please try and find the time to read the original book. It's so thoughtfully crafted.
Yeah, a summary just can't capture everything. There's so much depth there.
We've put a link in the show notes for you.
And we've kind of designed this conversation, especially for you, maybe if you're just starting out with academic research or, just beginning your own intellectual journey.
Right. We want to show you how a journalist like Neerja Chowdhury really unpacks these complex political events.
It's not just what happened, but how the decisions got made, the human side of it all, what it really means.
Think of it as maybe a guide to looking closely and understanding all those subtle layers in historical processes.
Exactly, learning to see the nuances.
Okay, so let's dive in. As we start looking into how prime ministers decide, what's one of the first things Chowdhury points out about holding that top office?
It's the inherent loneliness of the job. That really struck me.
Loneliness. That's interesting.
Yeah, and what's insightful is how the book immediately makes these powerful figures seem, human. History tells us the events, right? But it rarely captures the personal dilemmas, the emotional turmoil, the sheer isolation that comes with making those huge decisions.
So it reminds you there's a person behind the title grappling with things.
Precisely.
That's a really strong starting point. You might think, the head of government can just do whatever they want.
Right. Absolute power.
But the book suggests it's not like that at all.
Yeah.
How does this loneliness kind of paradoxically affect their power and isolation? Even figures like Indira Gandhi or Narendra Modi.
Well, that's the thing. Chowdhury shows that even for them, their choices were always tangled up in constant maneuvering, dealing with competing pressures.
Right.
So for someone like Indira Gandhi, she sometimes cultivated this aloofness, this distance. It was strategic, to create an aura of authority.
Ah, okay. A deliberate image.
Exactly. And then with Narendra Modi, Chowdhury notes how he actually sort of pitched the prime minister's lonely position almost as an asset, reinforcing that main Hunna image, I am here for you, to seem like this strong, dedicated leader carrying the weight all by himself.
Wow. So using that perceived loneliness strategically.
Yeah, it's a really fascinating look into the psychology of leadership, how you can turn a potential vulnerability into, a source of strength or control.
Okay, building on that idea of strategic control, something that really stood out for me was how the book details the growing power of the Prime Minister's office, the PMO.
Yes, the PMO. Crucial.
How did this centralization happen, and what does it really mean for how things are run?
It's a thread that runs right through the book. Chowdhury shows the PMO isn't just, an office. It became this carefully built machine for concentrating power. And if you connect that to how government works overall, it really shows the huge but often quite subtle power the PM has. Even when the Constitution says appointments like for the CBI or the Election Commission are made by the president.
Right, the president makes the appointment.
But the president is bound by the advice of the cabinet, which ultimately means the PM's advice. So the power flows back.
So it's using the existing structures to centralize control. The book traces this back a bit, doesn't it? Mentions Lal Bahadur Shastri feeling the need for a senior officer, L.K. Jha having a lot of influence.
Yes, Shastri, maybe a more diffident leader, felt that need first. But it was really Indira Gandhi who took centralization to a whole different level.
Okay, how does she do that?
Chowdhury points out she brought the Department of Personnel and Training, the DOPT, which controls all the civil service appointments, transfers, everything, directly under the PM's control in 1970.
Wow, okay. That's direct command over the bureaucracy.
Absolutely. And here's something quite, well, almost chilling that Chowdhury uncovers.
Oh.
She talks about these confidential files kept in the PMO. Information about corruption, women, and all kinds of misdoings.
Seriously?
Yes. Apparently, this started during Indira Gandhi's time with help from RNAW, the intelligence agency, and the idea was to, quote, keep adversaries on a leash.
That's incredible, using information as leverage.
It paints a really vivid picture of using institutional power and, well, information strategically.
It does make you wonder, though. Does Chowdhury explore the potential downsides? Like, does that much power in one place affect advice or accountability?
She does hint at that, subtly.
Yeah.
That this kind of concentration, while maybe efficient sometimes, could also mean less independent advice, fewer checks and balances. The PMO becomes almost a fortress. It's a theme you see repeating.
Okay, so if the PMO is becoming the central powerhouse, how does Chowdhury portray Indira Gandhi herself? She seems like such a complex figure wielding this power, but maybe feeling its weight, too.
Oh, absolutely. She's presented as incredibly complex. Chowdhury explores her natural reserve, her disagreements with her own father, Nehru, on things like splitting Bombay State,
Right.
and how she saw him very differently. She viewed Nehru as a saint who had strayed into politics, but about herself. She famously told a leader, Mera baap saab main nahin hun, my father was a saint, but I am not.
Wow, so she saw herself as a tough politician, fundamentally.
Exactly. Pragmatic, tough.
And you see that toughness in action, like the creation of Bangladesh in 1971, a huge geopolitical win.
A massive triumph. Vanquished Pakistan. She was even hailed as Durga, the warrior goddess by Vajpayee, who was then in the opposition.
By Vajpayee, yeah. But then Chowdhury shifts to that really difficult period, the emergency. What does the book reveal about the pressures that led to those decisions? They seem so contradictory sometimes.
Chowdhury really gets into the internal dynamics.
Yeah.
For instance, the growing rift with P.N. Hoxar, her principal secretary.
What happened there?
Well, Hoxar criticized her son, Sanjay Gandhi, for basically running his affairs from the prime minister's house.
Yeah.
He apparently told her she had to choose, be a mother or be the prime minister.
That's intense. Shows the personal pressure cooker she was in.
Immense pressure. And Chowdhury suggests these pressures fed into decisions like postponing elections twice in late 76 and pushing through the 42nd constitutional amendment.
That was a big one, wasn't it?
Huge. It massively expanded PMO powers, cut back court scrutiny, and even made fundamental rights non-justiciable, meaning citizens couldn't challenge violations in court as easily. A major power grab.
So given all that control she'd amassed, what does Chowdhury say about why she finally did call elections in 1977? It seems like a surprising move after tightening the screws so much.
Well, it wasn't simple. Chowdhury portrays it as this complex calculation. She was weighing so many things. Sanjay's growing unpopularity, her own authority starting to slip, pressure from overseas and at home,
And maybe her own feelings.
and her own inner turmoil, yes. It shows how even a decision like calling an election isn't just about timing. It's deep political strategy, juggling all these pressures and perceptions.
And then her comeback in 1980. Quite something.
Remarkable. Helped by bringing in new faces, even getting support from unlikely places like the RSS. Shows her pragmatism again.
So after that period of intense centralization under Indira, how did her son, Rajiv Gandhi, handle taking over? Especially given the tragic way he came to power.
It's a really poignant part of the book. Chowdhury highlights his reluctance. He came to power after his mother's assassination in '84, and the book shares this incredibly human moment.
What was that?
His wife, Sonia, apparently pleaded with him not to become prime minister. She was terrified for his life.
Understandably.
But he famously replied he had no choice. He would be killed anyway. That personal burden, that sense of danger, really hangs over his time in office from the start.
That's just heartbreaking. And the book suggests his leadership style was sometimes marked by, I think the word uses naivete, which led to problems.
Yes, naivete, and it comes up particularly in relation to the Shah Bano affair. That was a really sensitive case.
Remind us about that.
The Supreme Court granted maintenance payments to a divorced Muslim woman, Shah Bano. It sparked a huge national debate. Arif Muhammad Khan, one of Rajiv's own ministers, gave this powerful speech in Parliament defending the judgment.
But Rajiv didn't stick with it.
No. Chowdhury writes that he faced intense pressure from conservative Muslim clergy and ended up passing the Muslim Women's Bill, which effectively overturned the court's decision. It was seen as trying to appease that section of opinion.
It shows how outside pressure can really sway policy, doesn't it?
Exactly. And how a leader might get caught between different demands, leading to decisions with really long-lasting consequences for society.
And what's so striking is what happened soon after that the locks on the Babri Masjid were opened in 1986.
Right, a site holy to both Hindus and Muslims.
The book says he was warned this would become a huge issue, a rallying point for Hindu nationalists, the VHP. But he dismissed it.
Apparently so. He seemed confident it wouldn't blow up. Chowdhury suggests this whole sequence, Shabano, then opening the locks might have been an attempt to sort of balance things out politically, appease one group then another.
But it backfired.
It ultimately poured fuel on the fire of communal tensions with consequences that stretched for decades. But, Chowdhury is fair. She also credits Rajiv with important legacies,
like
taking the first real steps to open up India's economy, envisioning a more modern, tech-focused India. And he also gave the initial go-ahead for the nuclear tests that Vajpayee later carried out. So it's a very mixed picture.
Definitely complex. Okay, so after these periods led by the Gandhis, Chowdhury moves into this really fascinating era of coalition governments. How did that change things? How did PMs like VP Singh, Chandrasekhar, Devoga handle a totally different political reality?
That era, starting around the late 80s, really shook up North Indian politics. VP Singh's time as PM, though pretty short, was pivotal. Chowdhury argues he basically broke the Congress Party's long-standing dominance.
How did he manage that?
His big move was implementing the Mandal Commission report. That recommended job reservations for other backward classes, OBC groups facing social and economic disadvantage.
A controversial move, right?
Hugely. And the book reveals VP Singh wasn't initially that keen on reservations himself, but he came to see it as a political masterstroke, something that would divide parties along caste lines, and he hoped benefit him.
So a calculated political gamble with massive social impact.
Precisely. But it also sparked huge counter-reactions, like L.K. Advani's Rath Yatra, that big religious procession which really mobilized Hindu nationalist feelings.
Right. And what about Chandrasekhar? The book calls him the PM India remained deprived of. What's the story there?
His government was very brief, propped up by Congress. But Chowdhury highlights that he came surprisingly close to actually resolving the incredibly tense Ayodhya dispute through talks.
Really?
Yes. But then Congress pulled their support, and the government fell. A potential breakthrough lost.
And then H.D. Gowda, a very different kind of leader again.
Absolutely remarkable figure. The first Shudra from a traditionally marginalized community to become PM, first-generation literate, rose from very humble roots. His government was often called a government of chief ministers.
What did that mean in practice?
It showed how power had really shifted away from the center towards regional parties, particularly from the south. It was a whole new ballgame.
That phrase, government of chief ministers, really captures the challenge, doesn't it? Power being so spread out. And Chowdhury includes some memorable little stories from that time.
Yes, like the anecdote about Dev Gowda apparently nodding off during top-secret meetings about nuclear tests.
You can imagine the scientists' faces.
Exactly. These little details really bring home the human reality, the immense pressures of trying to lead a complex coalition, dealing with national security, and just sheer exhaustion. It's not just about the policy outcome.
It really isn't. Okay, so from those often chaotic coalitions, Chowdhury brings us to P.V. Narasimha Rao, a very different style again, described as a master of confusion yet also decisive. How does that work?
It's a great paradox, isn't it? And Chowdhury really unpacks it. Rao came to power unexpectedly after Rajiv Gandhi's assassination. His immediate focus, economic reform.
Right, the 1991 reforms.
Yes. The book reveals that literally within hours of taking office, he was already hunting for a finance minister who had connections with international bodies like the IMF and World Bank. He clearly saw the global winds shifting after the Soviet Union collapsed.
He brought in Manmohan Singh.
He did. Their partnership, initially a bit hesitant but then very strong, was key to steering India through that huge balance of payments crisis, devaluing the rupee, even pledging gold reserves. Chowdhury calls Rao quiet, self-effacing, but amazingly decisive. His quietness wasn't weakness, it was often strategy.
A deliberate ambiguity, maybe?
You could say that. Gathering information, building consensus, quietly before acting.
How did that enigmatic style play out during the Babri Masjid crisis in 1992? The book goes into that in detail, right? Especially when he was apparently warned to dismiss the state government in UP beforehand.
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
Chowdhury notes that Rao would listen intently to everyone, but he often knew all about the situation already through his own network, his many independent channels of information. One official apparently called it an octopus of sources.
An octopus? So he had his own intelligence network.
Seems like it. His strategy during the crisis was essentially to buy time, avoid a direct confrontation, even though his own ministers were urging him to act against the UP government.
And after the demolition happened,
Even then, he publicly promised to rebuild the mosque, took steps like acquiring the land around the site. It shows his unique, very indirect approach to crisis management. Some saw it as indecisive, others as trying to manage an impossible situation without making it worse preemptively.
it paints a picture of someone operating on multiple levels at once. Did this quiet decisiveness also apply to the nuclear test discussions in 1995?
Absolutely. The book shows him debating it internally. He'd often postpone decisions, seeming to waver, but he could be very decisive when he wanted. The Americans, specifically Ambassador Frank Wisner, got wind of activity at the Pokhran test site.
Through satellite photos?
Yes, and they confronted India. Rao apparently just denied it, called it routine maintenance.
Routine maintenance at a nuclear test site.
Quite. In the end, Chowdhury suggests he decided against testing then, mainly because India was still economically vulnerable, worried about international sanctions. But he kept the option open for the scientists, right up until he lost the election in '96.
So always balancing security, economy, international pressure, often behind that veil of ambiguity.
Exactly, a very complex operator.
From Rao's quiet complexities, Chowdhury takes us to Atal Bihari Vajpayee. A really unique figure, wasn't he? Seen as a moderate within the BJP, a party often perceived as more right-wing linked to the RSS. How did he manage that?
He really did carve out a unique space for himself, didn't he? Chowdhury notes he consciously cultivated that moderate image, something other BJP leaders haven't quite managed in the same way.
How did he do it? Was it just personality?
Personality played a part, but the book points to something else too, his long, undefined relationship with Raj Kumari Kaul.
Tell me more about that.
Chowdhury suggests it was a deep intellectual connection, and that Mrs. Kaul brought a different worldview, which significantly influenced Vajpayee, helping shape him into that more moderate figure. It's a fascinating glimpse into how personal connections can really impact a leader's political identity.
Now that adds a whole different layer. Of course, his time in office is heavily defined by the 1998 nuclear tests, Pokhran 2nd.
Absolutely central. And the decision was made incredibly fast after he took office.
A huge secrecy.
Immense secrecy. Chowdhury details how only a tiny inner circle knew initially. But what's really compelling isn't just the decision to test, but how Vajpayee and his national security advisor, Brajesh Mishra, handled the aftermath.
The international reaction was strong, wasn't it? Sanctions.
Yes, initial outrage. But they managed the fallout brilliantly through diplomacy. Chowdhury shows how this eventually led to a complete turnaround in U.S. policy towards India, culminating in President Bill Clinton's historic visit in 2000.
So a bold move, controversial, but ultimately reshaped India's global position.
Exactly. It shows how decisive action, even risky action, when managed well, can really change the game internationally.
But internally, within the BJP, things weren't always smooth. The book talks about the dynamic between Vajpayee and L.K. Advani.
Yes, especially after Advani's Ras Yatra had boosted his own popularity enormously. There was a clear power struggle, or at least a shifting balance.
Particularly around the 2002 Gujarat riots.
Right. Chowdhury writes that after the Godhra incident and subsequent riots, Vajpayee initially wanted Narendra Modi, who was Gujarat's chief minister then, to resign. But he had to climb down, as the book puts it, because Advani and the RSS strongly backed Modi.
So Vajpayee didn't always get his way, even as PM.
It shows the internal pressures. This eventually led to Advani being made deputy prime minister, largely due to RSS pressure. And then, according to Chowdhury, it was Advani who pushed hard for calling early elections in 2004.
Which didn't work out well for them.
No, it backfired badly. The BJP lost unexpectedly. It's a really compelling account of how internal party politics, ambitions, and maybe misjudgments can have massive national consequences.
Okay, our journey through these premierships now brings us to Manmohan Singh. Often seen as, a figure of quiet strength, he oversaw a big shift in India's global relationships. How did he even end up in that top job?
His selection was quite unique, wasn't it? The book reveals it was Sonia Gandhi who chose him in 2004. Apparently, her children were deeply worried about her safety if she became prime minister herself, given the family's history.
Wow, that's a heavy piece of background context.
It really is. It sheds light on those complex, often hidden factors that influence who gets power at the very top.
And domestically, the book mentions he had some initial doubts about big social programs like NREGA, the Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme, given his background as an economist.
Yes. His background was more focused on monetary policy, fiscal discipline. But Chowdhury shows how coalition politics worked. Sonia Gandhi, backed strongly by the left parties who were supporting the government from outside, really pushed for NRGA, and it went through.
But the realities of coalition government.
Exactly. But the place where Singh really asserted himself, where the book says he showed he could be his own man, was the Indo-US nuclear deal.
That was a huge undertaking, 2005 to 2008.
Monumental. Not just about energy or strategy, but a statement. It involved incredibly complex negotiations, getting the Americans on board, and crucially, securing that waiver from the Nuclear Suppliers Group, the NSG, even with countries like China opposing it.
A major diplomatic win.
Absolutely. A real case study in persistence in navigating complex international diplomacy to achieve a massive foreign policy goal despite huge obstacles.
But that achievement didn't come without challenges back home, did it? The book mentions the coalition difficulties.
Oh, definitely not. The balancing act was constant and intense. Chowdhury details managing the left party's fierce opposition to the nuclear deal. They nearly pulled the plug on the government over it.
And relying on other parties.
Yes, the controversial reliance on the Samajwadi Party to survive the confidence vote. The book touches on the allegations around that time, including cash for vote claims and quid pro quos related to legal cases against their leaders.
So it shows the messy reality of keeping a coalition afloat while trying to push big things through.
Precisely. The delicate, sometimes morally gray compromises needed to govern in India's multi-party system where every single MP can matter.
Okay, finally, the book brings us right up to the present, looking at Narendra Modi's time as Prime Minister. How does Chowdhury connect his leadership and the PMO under him to the PMs we've just talked about?
It's a very insightful way to round things off. Chowdhury draws some really interesting parallels. Karan Singh, the veteran politician, is quoted comparing Modi to Jawaharlal Nehru.
Nehru, how so?
In terms of ambition, Singh suggests Modi aims not just to lead, but to fundamentally remake India, much like Nehru did in the early years. He also points to Modi's Man Ki Baat radio broadcasts as being like an educator, similar to Nehru's efforts to communicate directly with the people.
Interesting comparison, but the book also draws strong parallels with Indira Gandhi, doesn't it? Especially regarding leadership style.
Yes, that's perhaps the most striking comparison. Chowdhury emphasizes the similarities, both concentrating enormous power within the PMO, both becoming figures who are arguably larger than their own parties.
And sensitive to criticism.
And sensitive to criticism, yes. The book basically argues that Modi has overseen the most powerful PMO India has ever had, possibly even more centralized than Indira Gandhi's at her peak.
How does that manifest?
It points out that many government ministers are now highly dependent on the prime minister for their own election victories, and that the PMO often directly guides their ministry's decisions. It suggests a continued trend, or maybe a cycle returning towards highly centralized power.
That's a really powerful observation. So it's not just about a strong personality, but a deep institutional centralization. What does Chowdhury suggest are maybe the long-term questions raised by having such a powerful, centralized PMO?
She doesn't offer easy answers, more leaves you to think about it. The implication is that while centralization can bring decisiveness, swift action, it also raises questions about, the health of other independent institutions, the balance of power in a democracy as diverse as India.
So the trade-offs involved.
Exactly. The trade-offs between different ways of leading and the lasting impact of how power is structured and used.
Well, exploring Neerja Chowdhury's How Prime Ministers Decide with you today has been fascinating. It really does give you this extraordinary look at the human side of power, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. That intricate web of personal struggles, political calculations, and just the sheer force of history shaping everything.
For you listening, maybe if you're just starting to explore these kinds of topics, we really hope this conversation has shown the value in digging deep into a single really well-researched source like this one.
Yeah, it's not just about gathering facts. It's about understanding the how and the why behind them. Getting different angles, finding those moments where things click, where information turns into real understanding.
Oh, this book isn't just history, is it?
No, it's like a guide to thinking critically about power itself.
Absolutely. And thinking about all these complex layers, the personal pressures, the strategic moves, maybe consider this. How does understanding that hidden dimension change how you might look at political news happening right now, or how you might approach your own questions if you're doing research?
We really encourage you again to read Neerja Chowdhury's original work. There's so much more to discover there.
Thank you so much for joining us on this journey today.
We hope you feel more informed and maybe even a bit more curious to explore further. And don't forget to subscribe to Revise and Resubmit on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Until next time, keep those minds curious, keep questioning, and keep revising and resubmitting.
রিভাইজ অ্যান্ড রিসাবমিটে স্বাগত। আপনারা শুনছেন আমাদের উইকেন্ড বুক রিভিউ পর্ব। আমি নিকিতা
আর আমি পাভলভ। আচ্ছা, 1977 সালের নির্বাচনের পর, মানে যখন ইন্দিরা গান্ধী হেরে গেলেন, তখন তিনি কিন্তু নিজের থেকেও বেশি চিন্তিত ছিলেন ছেলে সঞ্জয়কে নিয়ে। শোনা যায় মোহন নাগারওয়ালা নামে এক শিল্পপতিকে তিনি বলেছিলেন যে আমি নিজের জন্য ভাবছি না, আমি সঞ্জয়ের নিরাপত্তা নিয়ে চিন্তিত, ওরা ওর কী করবে কে জানে। মানে ক্ষমতার একেবারে শীর্ষে থাকা একজন মানুষের এই যে ব্যক্তিগত ভয়, এই উদ্বেগ, এগুলো নিয়েই নীরজা চৌধুরীর অসাধারণ বই হাউ প্রাইম মিনিস্টার্স ডিসাইড।
ঠিক। আর এই ব্যক্তিগত টানাপোড়েন, এই মানসিক দিকগুলো কিভাবে দেশের বড় বড় সিদ্ধান্তকে প্রভাবিত করে, সেটাই এই বইটার মূল আকর্ষণ, তাই না? আজকের এই আলোচনাটা কিন্তু সেই বইটার উপর ভিত্তি করেই। তবে এটা মূল বই নয়, বলা যেতে পারে একটা বৃহৎ ভাষা মডেল বা LLM এর সাহায্যে তৈরি করা একটা সারাংশ।
হ্যাঁ, আর নীরজা চৌধুরী সম্পর্কে দু এক কথা বলা দরকার। উনি একজন অসম্ভব গুণী সাংবাদিক, কলামিস্ট, রাজনৈতিক ভাষ্যকার। মানে 40 বছরেরও বেশি সময় ধরে কাজ করছেন, 8 জন প্রধানমন্ত্রী, 10টা লোকসভা নির্বাচন কভার করেছেন। ভাবা যায় উনি ইন্ডিয়ান এক্সপ্রেসের কন্ট্রিবিউটিং এডিটর।
ওন লেখা অনেকেই খুব মন দিয়ে পড়েন। তবে আমরা আবারও বলছি যে এই আলোচনাটা শোনার পাশাপাশি আসল বইটা যদি সময় করে পড়তে পারেন খুব ভালো হয়। বইটা অসম্ভব যত্নের সাথে লেখা। লিঙ্কটা আমরা শো নোটসে দিয়ে দিয়েছি। আর আমাদের আজকের এই আলোচনার মূল লক্ষ্যটা হলো যারা গবেষণা জগতে নতুন, মানে সবে কাজ শুরু করছেন, তাদের একটু ধারণা দেওয়া যে সর্বোচ্চ স্তরের সিদ্ধান্তগুলো কিভাবে নেওয়া হয়, এর ভেতরের গল্পগুলো যা বাইরে থেকে অনেক সময়ই বোঝা যায় না।
একদম। প্রথম যে বিষয়টা আমার মনে হয় নতুন গবেষকদের ভাবা দরকার, সেটা হলো ক্ষমতার ভেতরে থাকা মানুষগুলোর মানবিক দিকটা। মানে প্রধানমন্ত্রীর পদটা শুনলে অবাক লাগে, বেশ একাকিত্বের হতে পারে। যেমন ইন্দিরা গান্ধীর কথা শোনা যায়, বা ধরুন এখন নরেন্দ্র মোদীর ক্ষেত্রেও অনেকে বলেন। এই উঁচু জায়গায় থাকলে সাধারণ মানুষের জীবন থেকে যেন একটু দূরে সরে যেতে হয়।
হ্যাঁ, আর একাকিত্ব বা ধরুন ব্যক্তিগত কোনো ভয়, নিরাপত্তাহীনতা, মানসিক চাপ, এগুলো কিন্তু সরাসরি সিদ্ধান্তকে প্রভাবিত করতে পারে। যেমন বইটাতেও ইঙ্গিত আছে, জরুরি অবস্থার সময় ইন্দিরা গান্ধীর কিছু সিদ্ধান্তের পেছনে শুধু রাজনৈতিক কারণ নয়, হয়তো ওন ব্যক্তিগত উদ্বেগও কাজ করেছিল। গবেষকদের জন্য এখানে একটা বড় জিনিস শেখার আছে। মানে নেতাদের শুধু নীতি বা ঘটনার ফলাফল হিসেবে দেখলে চলবে না, তাদের ব্যক্তিগত অনুভূতি, সম্পর্কগুলো, যেমন ধরুন ইন্দিরা সঞ্জয়, রাজীব সোনিয়া বা পরে বাজপেয়ী আদভানির রসায়ন, এগুলোও কিন্তু খুব গুরুত্বপূর্ণ।
ঠিক। আচ্ছা, দ্বিতীয় গুরুত্বপূর্ণ দিকটা হলো এই সিদ্ধান্ত নেওয়ার প্রক্রিয়াটা আসলে কতটা জটিল হতে পারে। বাইরে থেকে দেখলে তো মনে হয় বেশ সহজ, একটা সিদ্ধান্ত নেওয়া হলো বাস, কিন্তু এর পেছনে যে কতগুলো স্তর থাকে, যেমন ধরুন ইন্দিরা গান্ধীর জরুরি অবস্থা জারি করা বা পরে মনমোহন সিংয়ের সময় ভারত মার্কিন পরমাণু চুক্তি, এগুলো তো সহজ ছিল না।
একদমই না। এর পেছনে থাকে অনেক চাপ, দর কষাকষি, এমনকি পর্দার আড়ালের বোঝাপড়া। যেমন শাহ বানো মামলার কথা ধরুন, সুপ্রিম কোর্টের রায়কে পাল্টে আইন করা হলো। মনে করা হয় এর প্রতিক্রিয়া সামলাতে কিন্তু বাবরি মসজিদের তালা খোলার সিদ্ধান্ত নেওয়া হয়েছিল। মানে একটা সিদ্ধান্ত কিভাবে অন্য একটা ঘটনাকে প্রভাবিত করছে, এই যোগসূত্রগুলো বোঝাটা খুব জরুরি। গবেষকদের তাই শুধু সরকারি ফাইলের গণ্ডিতে আটকে থাকলে চলবে না, বিভিন্ন গোষ্ঠীর চাপ, রাজনৈতিক বাধ্যবাধকতা, এগুলো খুঁটিয়ে দেখতে হবে।
তৃতীয়ত, ক্ষমতার কেন্দ্রবিন্দু আর তার হাতিয়ারগুলো। সময়ের সাথে সাথে প্রধানমন্ত্রীর দপ্তর মানে পিএমও কতটা শক্তিশালী হয়ে উঠেছে। বিশেষ করে ইন্দিরা গান্ধীর সময় থেকে এটা শুরু হয়। রাজীব গান্ধী তো আরও এক ধাপ এগিয়ে ডিপার্টমেন্ট অফ পার্সোনাল অ্যান্ড ট্রেনিং বা ডিওপিটিকে সরাসরি পিএমওর অধীনে নিয়ে আসেন। ক্ষমতাটা আরও কেন্দ্রীভূত হয় আর কি।
হ্যাঁ ঠিক। আর শুধু তাই নয়, গুরুত্বপূর্ণ নিয়োগগুলো যেমন ধরুন সিবিআই, সিভিসি, এমনকি নির্বাচন কমিশনের মতো সংস্থায় এই নিয়োগ প্রক্রিয়ার মাধ্যমেও কিন্তু ক্ষমতা নিয়ন্ত্রণ করা হয়। আবার রাজনৈতিক প্রতিপক্ষকে নজরে রাখার জন্য গোয়েন্দা সংস্থার তথ্য ব্যবহার করার কথাও বইতে এসেছে, যেমন বা আইবির কথা, বিশেষ করে ইন্দিরা গান্ধীর সময়ের কথা। সুতরাং গবেষকদের জন্য ক্ষমতার যে আনুষ্ঠানিক কাঠামো, তার পাশাপাশি এই যে অনানুষ্ঠানিক নেটওয়ার্ক, ক্ষমতার এই কেন্দ্রগুলো, এগুলোও বোঝাটা খুব দরকারি।
চতুর্থ যে বিষয়টা সেটা হলো রাজনৈতিক সমীকরণ আর সংঘাতের খেলা। জোটের রাজনীতির চ্যালেঞ্জগুলো তো আমরা দেখেছি, ভিপি সিং, দেবগৌড়া, বাজপেয়ী থেকে মনমোহন সিং পর্যন্ত সবার ক্ষেত্রে এটা ছিল। আবার দলের ভেতরের দ্বন্দ্ব, যেমন ধরুন বাজপেয়ী আদভানি সম্পর্ক বা মনমোহন সিংয়ের সরকারের সাথে বাম দলগুলোর যে টানাপোড়েন ছিল, সেগুলোও সিদ্ধান্ত গ্রহণে বড় ভূমিকা রেখেছে।
এর সাথে অবশ্যই যোগ পড়তে হবে আরএসএস এর মতো সংগঠনের প্রভাব, মানে বিজেপির আদর্শগত পথপ্রদর্শক যারা। বিভিন্ন প্রধানমন্ত্রীর সাথে এই সংগঠনের সম্পর্ক সময়ে সময়ে বদলেছে। ইন্দিরা গান্ধী, রাজীব গান্ধী, নরসিংহ রাও, বাজপেয়ী, সবার সাথেই এদের সম্পর্কটা একরকম ছিল না। তাই রাজনৈতিক সিদ্ধান্ত বুঝতে গেলে গবেষকদের এই দলের ভেতরের রসায়ন, জোটের বাধ্যবাধকতা আর এই সব প্রভাবশালী সংগঠনগুলোর ভূমিকা, এগুলো বিশ্লেষণ করতেই হবে।
এবং সবশেষে কিছু বিশেষ সিদ্ধান্ত যা দেশের ইতিহাসে একটা মোড় ঘুরিয়ে দিয়েছে, যেমন ইন্দিরা গান্ধীর জরুরি অবস্থা, ভিপি সিংয়ের মণ্ডল কমিশন রিপোর্ট কার্যকর করা, মানে ওবিসি সংরক্ষণ, যা উত্তর ভারতের রাজনীতিকে একেবারে বদলে দিয়েছিল, বাবরি মসজিদ বিতর্ক আর তার দীর্ঘমেয়াদী প্রভাব, রাজীব গান্ধী, নরসিংহ রাওয়ের সময়কার ঘটনা, বা ধরুন বাজপেয়ীর পারমাণবিক পরীক্ষা, মনমোহন সিংয়ের ভারত মার্কিন পরমাণু চুক্তি, এগুলো তো বিরাট ব্যাপার ছিল।
ঠিক এই ধরনের সিদ্ধান্তগুলো কেন নেওয়া হয়েছিল, কারা এর পেছনে ছিলেন, আর এর সুদূর প্রসারী প্রভাব কি হয়েছে, এই প্রশ্নগুলো গবেষকদের জন্য অত্যন্ত গুরুত্বপূর্ণ। ইতিহাস বা রাষ্ট্রবিজ্ঞান নিয়ে যারা গবেষণা করছেন, তাদের জন্য এই বইয়ের মতো গভীর বিশ্লেষণগুলো খুব সাহায্য করে। এটা বুঝতে সাহায্য করে যে ঘটনাগুলো শুধু কি ঘটেছিল তা নয়, বরং কেন ঘটেছিল। এই কেনটা বোঝা খুব জরুরি।
অর্থাৎ মুদ্রা কথাটা হলো, প্রধানমন্ত্রীর সিদ্ধান্ত নেওয়ার প্রক্রিয়াটা আসলে ভীষণ জটিল, অনেকগুলো স্তর আছে এতে, যা আমরা বাইরে থেকে শুধু খবর দেখে বা সরকারি বিবৃতি পড়ে ঠিক বুঝতে পারি না। নীরজা চৌধুরীর বইটা সেই ভেতরের স্তরগুলোকেই যেন সামনে নিয়ে আসে।
তাহলে আজকের আলোচনার শেষে একটা প্রশ্ন রেখে যাই, কি বলেন? ক্ষমতার একেবারে শীর্ষে যারা থাকেন, তাদের ব্যক্তিগত বিশ্বাস আর রাজনৈতিক বাধ্যবাধকতার মধ্যে যে একটা টানাপোড়েন চলে, সেটা কি সময়ের সাথে সাথে বদলায়, নাকি আজও ক্ষমতাধরদের সেই একইভাবে প্রভাবিত করে চলেছে? ভাবনার বিষয়।
অবশ্যই ভাবনার বিষয়। আর আবারও মনে করিয়ে দিই, নীরজা চৌধুরীর মূল বইটা পড়ার জন্য আমরা ভীষণভাবে উৎসাহিত করছি। লিঙ্কটা শো নোটসে দেওয়া আছে, সময় পেলে অবশ্যই পড়বেন।
नमस्कार।
रिवाइज एंड रीसबमिट में आपका स्वागत है। मैं हूं पावलोव
और मैं हूं निकिता। मार्च 1977 की बात है। इंदिरा गांधी चुनाव हार चुकी थीं और जब वो कार्यवाहक राष्ट्रपति बीडी जत्ती को इस्तीफा सौंपने गईं, तो कहते हैं उनकी सबसे बड़ी चिंता अपनी नहीं थी।
अच्छा।
हाँ, बल्कि बेटे संजय की सुरक्षा की थी। उन्होंने वहां मौजूद लोगों से कहा भी, मुझे अपनी फिक्र नहीं है, मुझे संजय और उसकी सेफ्टी की चिंता है। पता नहीं वे उसके साथ क्या करेंगे।
सत्ता के शिखर से उतरने के बाद का वो डर, मानवीय पहलू है ये।
बिल्कुल। और इसी तरह के मानवीय द्वंद्वों और राजनीतिक दांवपेच की परतें खोलती है सीनियर जर्नलिस्ट नीरजा चौधरी की किताब हाउ प्राइम मिनिस्टर्स डिसाइड।
हाँ, और आज की हमारी ये बातचीत दरअसल इसी किताब के कुछ मुख्य आइडियाज पर आधारित है। इसका सार समझने में हमने एक लार्ज लैंग्वेज मॉडल LLM की मदद ली है।
नीरजा चौधरी जी का तो खैर 40 साल से ज्यादा का अनुभव है। 8 प्रधानमंत्रियों का कार्यकाल, 10 लोकसभा चुनाव, कमाल का करियर रहा है।
हाँ, इंडियन एक्सप्रेस की पॉलिटिकल एडिटर भी रही हैं और कई अवार्ड्स भी मिले हैं उन्हें।
हाँ, चमेली देवी जैन अवार्ड, इंडिया टुडे PUCL ह्यूमन राइट्स अवार्ड, प्रेम भाटिया अवार्ड, और आज भी उनका कॉलम लोग बहुत ध्यान से पढ़ते हैं।
बिल्कुल। तो आज की ये चर्चा तो बस एक झलक है। हम तो यही कहेंगे कि ये किताब खुद जरूर पढ़नी चाहिए।
हाँ, सही बात है। मतलब चाहे आप इस चैनल से जुड़े हो या ना हो, किताब जरूर पढ़ें। लिंक हमने शो नोट्स में दिया है।
और खासकर उनके लिए ये बातचीत शायद उपयोगी हो जो पॉलिटिकल रिसर्च या अकादमिक दुनिया में अभी कदम रख रहे हैं।
हाँ, ये समझने के लिए कि टॉप लेवल पर फैसले कैसे होते हैं, मतलब सिर्फ नीतियां नहीं, उसके पीछे की उलझने, दबाव, इंसानी पहलू, ये सब।
हाँ, कुछ उदाहरण देखते हैं किताब से।
जरूर। किताब की खास बात यह है कि प्रधानमंत्री चाहे कितने भी पावरफुल दिखें, फैसले अकेले नहीं लेते। जैसे इंदिरा गांधी का इमरजेंसी का फैसला, वो सिर्फ एक पॉलिटिकल मूव नहीं था, उसमें उनकी निजी चिंताएं थीं, संजय गांधी का बढ़ता असर था, उस वक्त का माहौल, कई परतें थीं।
बिल्कुल। और फिर उनकी वापसी की कहानी भी उतनी ही दिलचस्प है। किताब बताती है कि कैसे उन्होंने बड़ी राजनीतिक कुशलता दिखाई।
हाँ,
यहाँ तक कि अपने विरोधियों और तो और RSS जैसे संगठनों से भी पर्दे के पीछे बातचीत की।
अच्छा, ये सत्ता की राजनीति का वो पहलू है जहाँ सिद्धांत और व्यावहारिकता की रेखा बहुत महीन हो जाती है ना?
हाँ, कह सकते हैं। फिर राजीव गांधी का दौर आता है, शाहबानो केस में सुप्रीम कोर्ट का फैसला पलटना,
गुजारा भत्ते वाला मामला।
हाँ, और फिर अयोध्या में विवादित स्थल का ताला खुलवाना। ये फैसले दिखाते हैं कि कैसे कभी-कभी तात्कालिक राजनीतिक दबाव
और वोट बैंक की चिंताएं,
हाँ, वो घोषित सिद्धांतों पर भारी पड़ जाते हैं। सलाहकारों का रोल, जैसे अरुण नेहरू का शुरुआती प्रभाव, वो भी काफी अहम था।
और ये दिखाता है कि कैसे एक कदम का असर दूसरे पे पड़ता है। शाहबानों पे मुस्लिम तुष्टीकरण के आरोप लगे
तो ताला खोलने को हिंदू तुष्टीकरण की तरह देखा गया।
बिल्कुल। तो जो लोग रिसर्च कर रहे हैं उनके लिए यह समझना जरूरी है कि इन घटनाओं के पीछे की सियासी गणनाएं क्या थीं और उनका दूर तक क्या असर हुआ।
फिर PV नरसिम्हा राव का कार्यकाल, वो भी विरोधाभासों से भरा माना जाता है। एक तरफ आर्थिक उदारीकरण जैसे बड़े फैसले,
हाँ, बहुत साहसी फैसला था वो,
और दूसरी तरफ बाबरी मस्जिद विध्वंस के समय उनकी भूमिका, उस पर सवाल उठते हैं। किताब ये बताती है कि कैसे वो अलग अलग गुटों से, यहाँ तक कि भाजपा RSS के नरम नेताओं से भी संवाद बनाए रखते थे।
तो राव का मामला ये दिखाता है कि फैसला लेना हमेशा हाँ या ना में नहीं होता। कभी कभी शायद कुछ न करना या अस्पष्ट रहना भी एक फैसला होता है।
हाँ, बिल्कुल। एक सोची समझी रणनीति भी हो सकती है। किताब उन पर लगे आरोपों और उनके बचाव दोनों को सामने रखने की कोशिश करती है, मतलब कोई सीधा निष्कर्ष दिए बिना।
ये अहम है। और ये अप्रोच अटल बिहारी वाजपेयी के दौर से थोड़ी अलग लगती है, जैसे 1998 में परमाणु परीक्षण का फैसला।
हाँ, वो एक बड़ा फैसला था। कहते हैं राव ने दबाव में इसे टाल दिया था, पर वाजपेयी ने घरेलू और अंतर्राष्ट्रीय दबाव के बावजूद ये किया।
किताब इसके पीछे की टाइमिंग, जैसे CTBT संधि की डेडलाइन और ब्रजेश मिश्रा जैसे सलाहकारों की भूमिका पर रोशनी डालती है।
हाँ, ये दिखाता है कि राष्ट्रीय सुरक्षा की सोच, अंतर्राष्ट्रीय दबाव, घरेलू राजनीति, ये सब मिलकर कैसे एक प्रधानमंत्री के फैसले को शक्ल देते हैं।
और दिलचस्प है कि वाजपेयी जी की छवि तो नर्म नेता की थी, पर यह फैसला काफी सख्त माना गया।
तो कुल मिलाकर हमने देखा कि प्रधानमंत्रियों के फैसले कोई सीधी लकीर नहीं होते। उसमें निजी विश्वास, सलाहकारों की राय, राजनीतिक मजबूरियां, देश दुनिया के हालात और हाँ, कभी-कभी शायद किस्मत का भी हाथ होता है।
सही कहा। सतह के नीचे हमेशा एक गहरी और अक्सर अनकही कहानी छुपी होती है।
और इन उलझनों को समझने के लिए नीरजा चौधरी की ये किताब हाउ प्राइम मिनिस्टर्स डिसाइड वाकई एक बहुत अच्छा जरिया है।
हाँ, हम एक बार फिर इसे पढ़ने की सलाह जरूर देंगे।
और अंत में सोचने के लिए बस एक बात, सत्ता के इतने ऊंचे स्तर पर लिए गए फैसलों की पूरी सच्चाई, वो पर्दे के पीछे की पूरी कहानी, क्या कभी पूरी तरह सामने आ पाती है?
या इतिहास हमेशा कुछ अनसुलझे रहस्य अपने अंदर समेटे रखता है। सोचने वाली बात है।